Vmfa 542 was an amazing squadron with superb senior leadership, complemented with skilled professional Marines that repaired and maintained our aircraft. We never had a mission canceled due to aircraft malfunction. Our air crews were more than ready for any mission assigned. The challenges were many. Weather was a constant enemy in the early months of combat operations while flying out of Chulai, South Vietnam. Our squadron was in Da Nang, South Vietnam when I first arrived in May 1966. The base facilities were well established and it continued to expand in size. Most missions flown out of Da Nang were flown in divisions, 4-plane sorties, into North Vietnam Route Package 1, targeting North Vietnamese Army artillery. Most sections, 2-plane flights, were hot pad flights in support of our combat Marines in distress. We had heavy commitments in July 1966 during Operation Hastings in support of Marines who were conducting amphibious heliborne assault operations just south of the Demilitarized Zone, DMZ, against the North Vietnamese Army, coined NVA. We also flew division flights in support of the Air Force into Laos for targets in the Mugia Pass and into Chapone to disrupt the North Vietnamese transportation of their troops and supplies. Both target areas were good for combat intramurals with the enemy. Their AAA guns versus our 500-pound bombs and 5-inch Zuni rockets. VMA moved south to Chulai in October 1966 from Da Nang, but this trip was interrupted by a short stay in Iwakuni, Japan from late July 1966 to mid-October 1966. Our new enemy was the monsoons. You'll now see an assortment of operations from Da Nang and Chulai in support of our Marines and Air Force commitments. The movie starts at Da Nang while taxiing north to the VMFA 542 flight line. You can see the Vietnamese Air Force base facilities with their helicopters, which the Marines probably had turned over to them. Next, we pass the Chinese Flying Tiger Airlines owned by General Chennault and Madame Chiang Kai-shek. And we'll be passing the Air Force's F-4Cs and their revetments, along with the F-105 visiting plane. And then you see a section of F-4s getting ready to take off for Marines in distress. Okay, this is the flight pattern coming into Da Nang, and we're taking off out of Da Nang, and we're heading north. This is in Operations Hastings that we are participating in July 1966. And it's a flight of 4 heading north. And you're going to see on these videos here what we had after we hit. I took and I'll show the targets that we hit and the smoke coming up in the upper right-hand corner. Right now you're just seeing the landscape, and it's kind of fast and furious because we're flying kind of fast and furious up in this area north of the DMZ and the North Vietnam. You're going to see the smoke rising. It's about a pillar of 4 right in the right-hand corner. Here are F-4s coming back. They've just just completed an attack on an artillery section, and they're flying with empty Zuni packs on our return to Da Nang. And you can see the Zuni packs on the wings, and you can see that we're dumping fuel. You had a light load coming, had to get down to a landing weight in order to come in safely. We're passing Marble Mountain, which controls all aircraft coming in the I-Corps area going north and south. And here we are back at Da Nang, and that's a 12.7 machine gun, the anti-aircraft gun that they were firing at us when we were supporting Operations Hastings. You're going to see more. I'll explain more about this gun later on. And this was right at the MAG 11 headquarters. And there's more section F-4 taken off. This is another flight of division of flying north into North Vietnam en route Package 1 to deliver ordnance against the North Vietnamese artillery that was firing against our Marine units south of the DMZ, trying to eradicate what NVA we had down there at the time. This is pretty dynamic in here, and I'm just showing some of the cloud formations that were pretty dominant during June and July of 1966 in the Icor area. That's Ashau Valley. That was a French base at one time, and now it's a supporting spot for the North Vietnamese in distributing their troops and supplies into the Icor area. And you can see some of the flying that we have going on here, and more of the scenery up in the area in Icor between Da Nang and Chu Lai. Here's an attack going on by our F-4s going in close air support. As we go in here, you're going to see some other interesting areas. Look at the landscape in some of the areas around here. It wasn't all jungle; it was flat land along the coastline. So it was pretty easy for close air support if troops were out in contact. It was as opposed to being in the jungles as you head west rather into Khe Sanh and so forth. That's a search and rescue aircraft coming back from North Vietnam along the coastline. It's an Air Force plane. And here we are, we're doing 30-degree dives against a ridge line just south of the DMZ. And you can see my section playmate dropping his ordnance as he comes through. We were dropping 500-pound bombs into this area that obviously was controlled by the North Vietnamese Army, and we were trying to eradicate them out of that. We did this quite often. The Chu Lai, Da Nang up through Ashau all the way into the DMZ was a fertile ground, and we were bombing that area day in and day out. So you're now seeing what it's like. I'm trying to hold the camera here, and some of the clouds and so forth. It's rather difficult to break out, but we were doing a fine job of getting in to get the targets that we needed to get. And here you see some of the results of our bombing. Evidently, we did a pretty good job of getting some of their supplies and so forth. As we march along here we are. This is in Chu Lai now, and this is in December of 1966-67, and we're flying in the monsoons, and you can see the rain and so forth that we were having to go through, and this is another shot of the Hainan Island, and we were heading to North Vietnam again out of Chu Lai to support the Marines who were getting hit by the artillery that the NVA brought down close to the DMZ. And as you can see, we always went with a division of 4 up into North Vietnam. Close air support generally was a flight of 2 aircraft going in for targets. And as you can see here, that's an observation plane that's directing us onto targets that we're going to be bombing. And you'll see some interesting shots here as we go along. There's a target that was hit, and we should see more of that just as we go along here. There we go. There's another hit of our wingman. Generally, I took these. The shots I took were after we had bombed. I would take shots of our wingmen going in and bombing, and you can see the observation plane out there telling them how well we did. This is in Chu Lai now. We just have the revetments up, and it's in December. And you can see it's rather foggy in the background. Well, that's the monsoon season, but here's pretty much of a clear day in retrospect to many other days. And we're taxiing in Chu Lai. That's an EC-121 Navy electronic aircraft. They would patrol along the seacoast of North Vietnam. And you can see the buildings that we were building up at the time in Chu Lai. And as I march, I'd say in November, December, January, February in Chu Lai, it was all a building process, and we were pretty much in a pioneer state. Here's a section going out, just getting ready to start out, and I was flying wing on it. And now we're up at Vmfa. This is a helicopter base, and on the deck there you can see the close by is the H-46s, and beyond that are the CH-34s. They were transitioning out of the old CH-34s, H-34s to the 46s. And as you can see, we're flying in bad weather now. This is all pretty much tough to stay in the clear. So we're flying about 16 grand going up to targets, and you can see we're loaded with bear to go in for a close air support mission. And here's the close air support mission going on right now. And this is my wingman going in, or it could be the lead, and we were the wingman. But it's all flat land, and it's all pretty much the forward air controllers, airborne forward air controllers would give us the run-in heading, the altitude of the target, and we would set up to do about a 10 to 11 degree dive, and we usually ended up releasing at about 700 to 500 feet because we had to give the ordnance time to be armed. You couldn't just drop it off and have it armed because the aircraft might experience the explosion versus the bomb hitting the ground. Here's some of the villages that in the rice paddies along the coastline. And as you can see that we're pretty much, it's pretty much as you thought of Vietnam to be. Now this is interesting. There's a water duct going up over the ridgeline here, and on the other side of this ridgeline, you'd think it was a California fire, but we were in there bombing the living daylights out of that place. Target rich for enemy. And here we are going back in for another strike, and you can see we're dropping snake eye bombs on this particular point. And I believe this is another run in in the same target area. Back at Chu Lai now again, and we're pretty much we're taxiing out, and the taxiing aircraft was not like a United flight. It was up and down, and you see the hills behind there. Those hills were controlled by the Viet Cong. Here we are coming back into Chu Lai again, and this is, as you can see, a landing of an F-4, and he's putting out a chute, and we're back in the attack mode here. And this is in between Da Nang and Chu Lai. We're doing a lot of bombing. And you can see the puffs up there that are out there, and you'll see the aircraft, the attacking aircraft coming across here shortly, I believe. Okay, there's one strike that has just come in, and here will be another strike that will be coming in. These aircraft we use, like if we're on a level run, we're releasing at least at 1,000 feet and coming in level, and it exposed us to a lot of AK-47 and machine gun fire, the 12.7 millimeter guns that they had down there, and they always carried, they always had these support guns that were firing at us. You don't see it too much because there aren't too many traces involved with this thing, but we periodically would get a fistful of lead coming in on our aircraft. And there's another hit that's going on in this particular area. Here's the base at Chu Lai, where you'll see the hills out there. Those hills were owned by the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong. And you can see the sandy ground that we had at Chu Lai. This is taxiing, as you can see, and here's the base itself with all the Pioneer equipment that we had. This is probably in December 1966. And here we are back out doing our business, close air support for the troops. And this was... most of our missions in Chu Lai were close air support, other than what I just told you about North Vietnam. That was a scene of Da Nang. We were crossing the base of Da Nang at this time. And here we are, we're out on another flight. We're coming back into Chu Lai now. And there's the base itself and the mountains in the background. We're on a crosswind run at this point, coming in for a landing. And you're going to see a whole slew of F-4s ready for takeoff. Going out on a mission. Now, there's an F-4 from 323 that didn't quite have a good landing, and it's the flight line and some of the equipment that we had. And this is in December, January of 1966-67, And you can see some of the equipment that we had and some of the aircraft in the revetments that we had at Chulai. This is a fairly good day. I tried taking pictures on the good days if we had. And here you can see it. We were flying along at 16 grand, and that's usually where the altitude we flew going to and from targets. This is a bad day. It's raining. You can't see the rain, but it is bad out there. And there's the ridge lines that we had, and like I said, it was owned by the NVA and the Viet Cong. And here are the helpers that we had down on the runway. Leveling the field, making it so that it was habitable. And there's an A4. That's a plane that John McCain was flying when he was shot down. And there's the support facilities at Chulai and the equipment they had. Look at the ground down there. Those are hard buildings. You didn't quite see them. You always have the impression that they're all thatch huts in Vietnam, but no, they weren't. They're pretty. Some of them were pretty well constructed, and it looks like virgin territory down there. But I think you're going to see bomb craters as we march along here to tell you that nothing was sacred. Hey, there you go, right there. Those are all bomb craters down there. And and again, we have a break in the clouds, so we're able to fly out to provide close air support. And we're on a close air support mission at this time. But there's a French Catholic church, and you're going to see this one again because the next time you see it, that's a fire support base. Next time you see it, you're going to see we were attacking the same target on a different day. In fact, 2 years later, I was attacking the same target. So it was rather interesting. And here you are. We're in a hard right turn, coming around for, I believe, an attack. And we're up close to the DMZ, as this is shown, because of the waterways that I see here. It's going to get real fogged in here. Now we're escorting helicopters, and we're heading. We're heading into Elephant Valley, which is northwest of Chulai, and we were providing helicopter escort. And what you did was one plane flew on one side of the helicopters, going the same direction as they were, and then the playmate flew on the opposite direction on the other side of the helicopters, and they pointed down at the ground, so in case the helicopters picked up ground fire, we were there to suppress it. And we also were providing landing zone suppression of any type of anti-aircraft guns that were in the landing zone. Here you are, just seeing some of the landscape again, some of the things, the weather and so forth to show it. This plane has been shot up a little bit. We were doing close air support low level, and we were too low, I believe. And not only did we take a few rounds, but we took trimmed a few palm trees in the process. And the flight maintenance chief's out there cutting his hand across his throat saying, "This plane's down. Have a nice day." But stuff happened, and there they are preparing the post-flight of the aircraft, where they're packing the chute back into the aircraft. But those are wing tanks that we carried on the aircraft, and a lot of times we never did use all the fuel because the flights were out there. It's a 2,000-pound bomb that's used to open up a landing zone. It's a kind of a big bang, so to speak, but it was quite something else. You're going to see this is a target-rich environment out here. Look at all the smoke coming up. There were A4 attacks, A4 airplanes attacks, and F4s are attacking a whole slew of targets out this is along the DMZ. And we were having a field day out there. Look at the targets we had, and look at the results of what were coming up. We really had a field day out there. The area, usually were controlled by forward airborne controllers. This H-34's en route for supplying somebody. And here we are. We're coming in on an attack, I believe, and you're going to see out of my rear view mirror the bombing run that we had into the target. And it should be coming up here very shortly. There it is right there. You can see it in the rearview mirror. I took a shot of us dropping a snake eye, 500-pound snake eyes on the target. And the rest of them are going to show our wingmen going in on the same target, providing close air support to the troops. We had enemy in contact. Realize this film is now over 52 years old. So it's going back a ways, but it's good to see what we did. And we made several runs on this. So what you see every time, there you go. Every time you saw something, it was of our wingman dropping his ordnance. And then this is just some more showing it, and here we are, we're on the river, and the rivers are always target rich. And you're going to see there's a 30-degree dives out there, a wingman coming in and dropping close to the river. And what he's doing is probably troops concentrations in the mountains beside the river, because they had unloaded all their supplies and then take it into these various tunnels that they had. So here we are, we're dropping 500-pound bombs on what I consider to be supply depots along the river. They were supplied along the river by the junks that came up and down the river from Laos into South Vietnam. And you can see my cockpit window was not too clean on some of these, but this is November through March. In July, the weather was bad, and we were always having to pick our points to dive down underneath the clouds to do our business. But we didn't do a bad job. It was. And you can see we're flying over what we had already done, and you can see some of the hot spots of where our ordnance had been dropped. And again, this is more close air support as we're going along. Now we're all along the beach, and you can see the boats, the fishing fleet of the Vietnamese. When they went out to sea, they covered the ocean. And here we are, we're flying back in. And when we get on top, we'd climb through, get on top, and then check ourselves for ordnance. These are ships along, and here we are breaking off, going into Chulai. And you can see the bombing racks that we had underneath the airplane. But we always would join up in close formation and go above the clouds, and then we would spread out a little bit. We'd check ourselves over for any hung ordnance, and then continue our flight back into Chulai. And this is what we're doing at this time. And you can see when we're in close formation, you're going to see some more close formation. Here you go. Kind of like the Blue Angels right here. But we've gotten above the clouds, and he'll spread out when we get in closer to the base. And we're back at the base again here, and here's some more shots as we're taxiing in, and I'm just trying to make sure that I can take some of these shots. So there are the Chinese, the Viet helpers that we had by day, and our enemy by night. There's the church again. Same church, different day, maybe a different month, but the target was the same. And we're coming back into Chulai now, and you can see I'm trying to take a shot of us coming in for a landing, and it's interesting to see it's coming down, and it seems very casual and very slow, but we're moving at about anyways between 150 to 125 knots coming down to land. And you can see the landing, the tire marks on the runway. And there are the nice, neatly stacked ordnance that we have all over the place. And there's napalm. And we just saw 500-pound bombs, and those are napalm on carts ready to be loaded. And you can see the Chulai city, so to speak, and the new hangars going up. And this was in January of 1967. And you can see the points that we have for security checkpoints, and also where their bunkers that were occupied at night. And you can see some of the revetments still going up along in here. And now this is Motel 6. This is where we lived, and there's the fancy bathrooms that we had, and nothing to brag about, but that's what we had, and we lived with it without any trouble. And I'm showing some of the scenery that we had in the places where we lived, and you can see some of the rudimentary telephone lines that we had up, electricity lines, and some of the the generators we had if the electricity went down. And you can see here we have base operations, flight operations going on, a flight taking off. Again, the hills behind us were not friendly. And this was in 66, 67, and 69 and 70 when I came down from Da Nang to visit Chu Lai for a briefing. The Army was providing us with defensive control, and they patrolled by fire at night. So the whole country, mountain ridge line up there was always lit up at night with machine gun fire being fired up at them. It was kind of entertaining to watch the traces going off as they patrolled by fire. This is in bad weather right now, and you can see how bad it was. And you can't see the rain, but I'm telling you, this was all monsoon at its best, and we were taking it right in the ear. Flights were very small and going off. But and that was taken in the flight shack of 542's flight line. There's a tower, and up there they controlled all the aircraft taking off and landing at Chu Lai. And you're just seeing some of the scenery that we have there. The hangar was being built so to replace those Pioneer hangars that we had. That's napalm on the aircraft with a gun, and generally 2 stations of napalm, and those are rock eyes. They're Zunis, 5-inch Zunis that we were using in close air support. Here we are getting ready for another flight, and that is a French plantation. As we headed up to North Vietnam, we went by this is south in the DMZ, unscathed by any type of North Vietnamese, Viet Cong, or us bombing there. So he had a plantation. It was sterile, not touched. And this is going up the coast of Da Nang, and that's an old French checkpoint. And this is right along the Hai Van Pass, coming out of Da Nang, and it's going north towards Hue, and from Hue you'd go up to Quang Tri. But the coastline, it was real tough. It was very hard. This is a flight section, and the section leader was J.J. Morin, and his radar intercept officer was Skip Greenfield. They were quite a team. J.J. was an excellent bomber, and Skip provided him the support he needed to make some of the best hits I've saw in a long time going up there. How did I know it was J.J.? Well, J.J., when he took off, his ladder to climb in the airplane was not seated. So after he started making his runs and pulling off, the ladder came out, and so this is how I knew it was JJ. After 50 years looking at this film, I knew I had finally found a air crew that that I could identify on a bombing mission, and this was the mission that they are on. I'll say this for them: Holy Cross, a class of '62, JJ and Morin and Skip Greenfield, they were a very, very effective team, and God bless them. Both of them now, they both had very successful business careers and are now in Marine heaven. Rest in peace, JJ and Skip. But Look at this mountain. This is interesting also for anybody that is interested in geology. This is a mountain out in a stark hill out in the middle of these rice paddies, and of course the North Vietnamese took over king of the mountain, and we were out there trying to pound the daylights out of them. But you can see the bridges, and this is the pattern that we had. It was kind of a racetrack pattern coming in, but you can see all the scenery down below. There were a lot of bridges out. And again, there's JJ, his hit going in. Our hit is the smoke that you just have seen, but we were not. There's nothing I could do to score on that. And as you can see, we had plenty of ordnance, and we were having a field day out there. And then after we take off from here, get our battle damage assessment, we would climb out in close formation and check out if we had any hung ordnance. And here we are, seeing JJ and Skip as the lead, and they would look underneath the aircraft to see if all the bombs had been released. And JJ is now dumping fuel. This was close to Chulai, so we were having to unload the fuel, some of the fuel we had, to get down to landing weight. And as you can see, we're pretty much flying in close proximity to one another. And we'll get a little closer here, and you'll see JJ with his ladder out, and there's a shot of me. If I can get out of this looking in the cockpit. But here we are, we're coming in close here. Now you'll see JJ's ladder, and they're the racks that held the bombs. And you probably can see some of the wires dangling. And here's the ladder out on JJ's airplane. See it sticking out? That's what you climb up to get into the cockpit. Not usually set out like it is. Those are Sparrow missiles. We carried 4 Sparrow missiles. They're air-to-air missiles. You'd fire them if you were in combat with enemy aircraft. You would fire these missiles either from the front or from the generally in the forward quarter. That we tried to attack our missiles. Anything coming along, we would. They were radar guided, and that was the responsibility of the radar intercept officer in the back seat. But now you're seeing some of and JJ's he's now breaking off to land, and you're going to see us break off maybe 4 potatoes, and then we would break right behind him to come into land. And we're coming over across the airstrip right now for coming around to make our landing. And you can see again some of the facilities on the base there, the bunkers, and that's a crosswind taxiway. And they were still working on it, and that's set. This completes the video. I'd like to cite some of my brave squadron mates that flew these missions. They were characters, but professional, brave, and effective Marines. Lieutenant Colonel Don May, commanding officer from June to February of '67. Lieutenant Colonel Fred Farrell, commanding officer from February '67 to July '67. Captain Larry Bacon, Captain Dick Bardo, Captain Del Bassett, Major Harvey Bradshaw, Captain Dirk Buffington, Major Mike Cady, Lieutenant B.D. Cole, Captain Leo Cullum, Captain Paul Davenport, Captain Bob Daniels, Lieutenant Bill Deckey, Major Steve Eisenhower, Captain Pat Faulkner, Captain Paul Fratangelo, Lieutenant Chuck Geiger, Lieutenant Gary Geller, Captain Skip Greenfield, Captain Al Griggs, Lieutenant Gary Hoagland, Lieutenant Pat Holland, Captain Jack Jones, Captain Jim Crothers, Captain Rick Lewis, Captain Brendan Lynch, Major Eddie Magg, Captain Skip Martinson, Lieutenant Fred McGarry, Captain Dan Mediola, Lieutenant Jason McCord, Captain Jim Moran, Warrant Officer Murphy, Major Ray Pendergraft, Major Walt Poitevin, Captain Thomas Frosch, Captain Dave Prue, Captain Jack Lieutenant Jack Reagan, Lieutenant Kevin Rick, Major Bob Roach, Captain Vic Russillo, Captain John Shinnick, Captain Dave Spearman, Lieutenant Bob Snyder, Captain Mike Stouffer, Warrant Officer Walt Stringer, Captain Hank Taff, Captain Art Tozzi, Captain Jay Whitus, Captain Woody Woolridge, and many more. My memory is slipping. I wish I could again meet them at the Chulai Officers Club bar and sing our six songs like Take It Out at the Ball Game, Wave It Around at the Crowd, or demonstrate the three-man lift. I salute you all. The end. Semper Fidelis, Bill Bridgham.